I'd like to call to order the City of Littleton City Council virtual study session for Tuesday, July 28, 2020. The time is 6:30 p.m. or 1800. All council is present. And our first item on our agenda tonight will be ID number 20-155, proposed policy for reviewing service plans for metropolitan districts. And council, I do believe that staff is looking for directions after our discussion, so let's keep that in mind. I'll turn it over first to the city manager.
All right, Mayor, and good evening, council. Actually, I think we've got our city attorney, Reed Betzing, who's going to kind of lead this conversation. We've also got Kathleen Osher, as well as here, and Jennifer Henninger, they're attending. And then Peggy Dowswell with the Pinnacle Group is a consulting firm who, as you've heard just a few seconds ago, specializes in metro districts. And so Reed's been leading this discussion internally. And so with that, Reed, I'm just going to turn it over to you.
And if I may, want council too, if you will use the raise the hand icon so that I can get you and hopefully in the right order. Thank you, Reed.
Jerry, could you review where that is?
It will depend on your computer. Probably if you go to the participants.
Ah, I remember. Thank you. Got it.
Okay. All right. Take it away, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening to you and City Council. As Mark mentioned, I have with us tonight is Peggy Dowswell. She's from Pinnacle Consulting Group. Pinnacle Consulting has a ton of experience with metro districts in Colorado, and I figured for technical questions, she would probably be the best person to have, and she's agreed to join us. So I would like to thank her in advance for council's difficult questions. And let me see if I can bring this up. I totally should have had Jennifer manage the slides on this. Okay, can everyone see that?
I see it.
There we go. So tonight, as mentioned, we wanted to talk about metropolitan districts, and metro districts are really a type of special district. And so in order to get into what metro districts are, we figured we should probably talk a little bit about special districts, why metro districts are typically created, what our current zoning regulations are, special district regulations are, as well as the proposed policy. And then get direction from council whether or not you're okay with the proposed policy. If so, there are some refinements you would like for staff to make. Right now, this is just in a draft form, so it's not final, and we can always make changes to it. So high level, a special district is a type of government. It's essentially the same thing as the city. They're quasi-municipal corporations and political subdivisions of the state. Right now, we have close to 4,000 special districts that operate within Colorado. Most of those are what are called single-purpose districts. So Parks and Rec. So we have South Suburban, a Parks and Recreation District, who is a special district. We have South Metro Fire districts are also special districts. When we talk about metro districts are a type of special district, but they have to provide at least two types of specific services. And those can be, a lot of the times what we're seeing is transportation, traffic, safety. A lot of the infrastructure that comes in are a result of metro districts. So, you know, one of the biggest metro districts in the state would be Highlands Ranch. Highlands Ranch is not a city, it is just a specific metropolitan district. So, you know, metro districts can take on a variety of different forms. Highlands Ranch offers certain amenities that are passed along by way of property tax to residents within that district. But a lot of times what they're being used for is to help fund infrastructure. So when a developer is coming in, there's all sorts of costs associated with the roadways, with the sidewalks, with water, sewer, all those things. And so they put together this metro district. And one of the benefits of a metro district is it can be financed over time. And because they're a governmental entity, they can issue tax exempt bonds. And so when we were talking about all the items that go into the construction, just really the infrastructure, a lot of the use tax that they would have to pay, they don't have to pay. Some of the other benefits are property owners within a metro district can deduct their taxes paid. That comes from, it's a deduction from their federal taxes. A lot of the changes that we've seen with metro districts now are they're acting a lot like an HOA would. So the architectural control and covenant compliance, you see certain metro districts, depending on their service plan, start taking over a lot of those aspects. One of the nice things about the metro district is in terms of the operations and maintenance costs that they can continue to pass along to their residents. So you don't have the issues with an HOA that is, struggling trying to get individuals to, pay their HOA dues. One of the other benefits is because they're a governmental entity, they're afforded certain types of immunities. So the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act is an act that the city enjoys. So it caps certain amounts of their liabilities. In terms of the formation and organization of a metro district, the city saw one this fall. I think it's called the River Park Metropolitan District came in. So what they do is they submit a service plan to the city, and it's pretty bare bones in terms of what the city can do. You can either approve it, not approve it, or approve it with conditions. And we can add certain things, require certain things. But one of the issues that we've had, which is what brings this discussion tonight, is we don't have a lot of guidelines in terms of what we require from a metro district, what we require in terms of their service plan. So once the service plan is submitted to the city, it then goes for a petition for district organization. That goes through the district court. There's an election of property owners within that metropolitan district. Then they go back to the court and get that certified, and off they go. As I mentioned, because they're a governmental entity, they're required to do a lot of the same things that the city does. So, we have an Open Records Act that we have to abide by. There's election codes, there's open meeting laws, there's all sorts of governance in place and laws in place designed to show some sort of transparency as it relates to the functioning of the Metropolitan District. As I mentioned, we have a pretty bare bones type of special district regulations or metro district purposes of this conversation. It's essentially modeled off of the state statute. I think the city adopted it in 1980 or 1981, and the city has not made any changes to it. So I think staff, when we evaluated the River Park Metropolitan District, had a lot of challenges, which was one of the reasons that Pinnacle Consulting agreed to consult with the city in terms of taking a look at the service plan, taking a look at what Evergreen, the developer, was proposing as part of this River Park Metro District. Some of the challenges that staff found is that it didn't provide any clear set of approval criteria. And I think council may have struggled with this when they took a look at the service plan and said, well, what can we really do? And based upon what our current ordinance says, not very much. There wasn't a clear fee structure, and there's no guidance on what should be required in a service plan. So you don't have to read this one, but when staff and I and Jennifer and I were talking about our existing Metro District policy, we don't have one. All we have is basically this section right here, which talks about the service plan, and it's pretty bare bones, as I mentioned. Council, the only time that council could disapprove a service plan is if, and here were the 6 criteria, but it was if there was insufficient existing and projected need for the service, whether or not the service that was being provided is adequate for the projected needs, whether or not the city was going to come in and do anything. So when we look at certain areas, we'll call them greenfields, if you will, where there's no development at all, I mean, hitting these criteria is pretty simple. There wasn't any roads, there wasn't any infrastructure in place. So yeah, you're going to need it. Does the city plan on doing it? No. So, you just check the boxes, and not a lot there for council to hang their hat on in terms of the evaluation. So when we started talking about what should be in a Metro District policy, one of the things that we really wanted to look at was what's an end user going to get out of having this, tax liability, if you will, imposed on them? Are there going to be anything else other than, a standard street, road, curb, gutter? So what this proposed Metro District policy does is it establishes that criteria, guidelines, and processes to be followed. And that's not just for council and staff, but that's also for a developer. And so really trying to create the expectations for a developer coming into this city who may want to use a Metro District. What are the expectations? What is the city going to require in order for them to evaluate whether or not it's necessary or not? So I believe the proposed Metro District policy sets forth a pretty clear application process, pretty clear timelines, clarification on the fees, and it provides some protection to the end user by way of caps on mills as it relates to specifically operations and maintenance. I know that council has undoubtedly read the article that came out in the Denver Post. I want to say it was in December. It was a 3-part article. And in there, they kind of highlighted some of the, I would say, and Ms. Doswell could probably correct me, but it was probably some of the more larger horror stories, if you will, that I think are probably unfairly put on Metro Districts. I think there's probably a few that, have not been successful, didn't provide anything, and led to having end users be stuck with a pretty tremendous tax burden. So those are the anomalies. Those are not indicative of what we typically see with metros. But some of the other things that the policy does is it allows for annual financial reviews. And as I had mentioned before, encouraging benefits outside of just basic infrastructure. The proposed policy also sets forth requirements of the service plan. The service plan is really the governing document, if you will, of the Metro District. It is kind of the charter, if you will, almost like the city's charter. And within that service plan, they're going to have to identify, why do you need the district? Explain to us, why is it that you really need to have a Metro District? How is this providing a benefit to not only the end users, but kind of the general public? It places restrictions on eminent domain. As I mentioned, there's a cap on operations and maintenance expenses. That can be challenging depending on what the amenities are. So if you were having aquatic features, if you had someone who came in and they were going to be doing a rec center or something along those lines, that allows for once the debt is paid from the actual construction, it allows for them to continue the upkeep. So some of those, depending on what the amenities are more expensive than others. It requires a disclosure of their financial plan, as well as the debt, the proposed debt. And this particular policy requires disclosure notifications. So one of the things that I believe council is probably familiar with, or what you've heard, is those individuals who buy into a particular location and have no idea that there's a metro district. And so then they're wondering why they're getting this, this tax assessed to them of, several $1,000s, depending on what the mills are. But what this would allow is that this disclosure would actually be filed with the county assessor's office. So once they did their title search, this information would come forward. So it would be no surprise that there's a metro district or hidden fees, if you will. Basically, that's really kind of the high level, quick presentation regarding this proposed draft policy. As I mentioned, the city has no policy. And so we figured something was better than nothing. But I guess what we're asking for council is direction in regard to this proposed draft policy. If council wants to bring this forward, if council has questions, if council wants to have revisions made to this policy. And so that's all that I have, and happy to answer any questions. I don't know, I guess before I do that, if Jennifer has anything that she wants to add.
Just echoing what Reed said, and as we have new development, especially we know that the South Enzer property, as it's commonly referred to, we are fairly certain that they will pursue a metro district. And having gone through what we did with Littleton Village as well as River Park, we do need something that has more criteria and more things for staff to evaluate the proposal, as well as when we bring it to council, that you have to make those decisions. So this was our attempt at getting those policies and criteria in place. So we're looking for some feedback.
Great. We do have a couple questions. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem, and then after that, it'll be Councilmember Fay.
Yes, thanks, Reed, for your presentation and for taking a stab at drafting a policy. I think it's important that we revisit the city's antiquated policy on metro districts. I want pretty significant changes made to the draft policy so that it becomes, quite frankly, a straight ahead policy of consumer protection. And so let me explain why. We're not one of these northern Front Range communities like Windsor and so on that, for pretty understandable reasons, feel like they need to grow, right? They're new communities, they need residents, they need commercial areas and so on. By contrast, Littleton is effectively built out. The need going forward for metro districts is going to be, I think, very limited. I think many of the council members are aware of the real moral pitfalls of metro districts, and I want to make sure that we avoid those. I think that we need a shorter loan term. We need to make sure that the limits on the loan term can't be avoided by refinancing. I think we need to reduce the mills, right? The average metro area homeowner is paying something like 77 mills in property tax. Adding 50 mills to that is, almost a doubling of the property tax burden. I think the notification requirements are going to get tucked into a bunch of already hyper complicated mortgage documents, and in any event, they're going to be written in finance speak. So instead of someone being able to readily consult a document that says in dollars, this is going to be your property tax burden out of the metro district, they have to do calculations based on mills this and other things. And I'll say that I'm an attorney who did coursework on Colorado local government in law school, and I don't even know how to do those calculations. It's incredibly complicated and not at all transparent. I think that we need to get end users on these boards very quickly, and I think we need to set a timeline for doing that. These boards are almost always made up of, effectively the developer and people with interests aligned with the developer, including sometimes their spouses. And I think where a lot of what's wrong with metro districts hits rock bottom is with regard to the board members' ability to buy the debt that they've created, sit on it for a little while, and just watch their investment cash in over time. Meanwhile, homeowners, get stuck with often very significant tax bills for, I think, infrastructure and other capital improvements that are not at all justified by how much we're talking about in terms of that tax bill. I think that at its worst, this arrangement of especially being able to buy your own debt, it becomes a bit of a racket, and that's not what's best for the end users, the homeowners, the citizens of Littleton. And again, right, we don't have a huge need for metro districts, right? We're built out, and so I think what we need to do is protect our end users, protect our citizens, protect homeowners through all those changes that I mentioned. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Good points. Council Member Fay.
Feedback on the document you gave us. It seems that it is written in what I'm going to call soft language. It doesn't seem like it has any teeth in it. And it could be that there is a special kind of language for this kind of document that I don't know about. But things like in Section E, policy statements number 2 are expected to provide. Okay, expected to provide. Number 3, use of control districts, and then some words left out, is to be discouraged. Number 4, will not be favorably received. So those things, if I were a developer, I think I wouldn't care really if my proposal was favorably received. What I want to know is, can I get it done? So not giving up, I have another thing to say after this, but Reed, am I on to something here, or would you respond?
I certainly understand where you're coming from in terms of, it's a policy, so it's not necessarily regulation. It's more of providing that guidance, but I can certainly appreciate where you're coming from with that for sure.
Can it be toughened up?
Sure.
Well, let's do that. Then I want to continue. I've been working with the Metro District for Littleton Village for almost 3 years now. The first contacts I got when I was elected was the morning after the election. I heard from 3 people, residents, property owners in Littleton Village, saying, please help us. We can't get our Metro District to listen to us. So I went to a Metro District meeting, and I was appalled. It was exactly like Scott mentioned, in that the board was made up of developers, and all of these people on the board were being paid like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to be on this board. Meanwhile, the residents who asked me to be there were trying to get their trash picked up, and we're trying to get parking straightened out. And they couldn't do that through the city because it was a Metro District concern. The Metro District, to this day, is difficult. And then finally, I would like for a prospective buyer, somebody who's shopping for a house in Littleton or a residence in Littleton, to have it disclosed while they're looking at the property somehow, that this is a Metro District and this means X dollars additional. The people I have talked to at Littleton Village had no idea what a metro district was, that had no idea that one existed there or what it would be like. It was an ugly surprise. It seems upon signing closing papers that that's awfully late. You've made a decision, you've invested a lot in that property, and then to get that surprise at the signing date, you're just going to go whatever. And I would like to have it be read. Could it be sooner? The notification of the Metro District, about the Metro District.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll have to be thoughtful about how that disclosure could occur. At some point, it's between a buyer and a seller, and we don't have privity of contract over those individuals. So recording it with the county, but is one way. But you're right. When you show up at a closing, you got the title company there, you've got the buyer, the seller, you got the keys, and you've got 30 documents
to sign. You don't know what they are.
Right.
You don't care.
I mean, to be honest, a lot of it is on the person purchasing that property to be doing their due diligence. I can appreciate that they're not going to, no one's reading any of that stuff that is submitted to them. But it's really up to them to, either work with their realtor if they're using one to, give them that information. I don't know if there's anything on the standard property form that's used to sell property, if there's a disclosure on there, if it's in a metro district. I'm not sure if that's made it in there. I know the legislature has taken looks at this issue over time to see what can be done. I'm not sure if it's there yet. I don't know if Peggy knows anything more regarding that disclosure. She's unmuted.
I'm unmuted. Hi, thank you.
Peggy.
Hello, thanks so much for having me. Peggy Dowswell, Pinnacle Consulting Group. So on the sales agreement form, it does say this property may be within a special district. We've been joining with sales agents to have a box that's actually checked, but so far the form just discloses that it may be. The other easy way to look, I know when I buy property, I always look at the tax bill. That's easy to look at in the county website, and it shows the districts clearly in their mill levies.
Yeah, that may be the answer. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions at the moment, but Reed, I do have a question for you, and maybe for Ms. Dowell. But there are a number of concerns, and I'm really basing my concerns on some of that stuff that was in the paper end of last year, I think it was. And Scott's, the mayor pro tem has brought up many concerns too. Is this just something you want to update and get into the book sooner rather than later? As I recall, it's on the study session, or the regular meeting coming up here in a couple of weeks, or next week maybe, or maybe it's a couple of regular meetings yet. But is this something that we need to get on now, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think our initial thoughts were something was better than nothing, and right now we have nothing. I don't know if there is a future metro district. I think we had talked about the south part of Enser may be interested in coming in with the metro district.
Correct.
Obviously, if they came in before we had anything adopted, they would not be subject to any of kind of the conditions, if you will, for our approval. I can appreciate a lot of what I've heard in regard to making it at least stricter. And I guess that's the direction I'm looking from. I know Carol, Ms. Fay wanted, some teeth to this. And obviously, I don't know if the rest of council shares the concerns that Mayor Pro Tem brought up. Obviously, I've heard those. So really, that's the direction that I'm looking for. So if council is, thinks it's okay, then we can put it forward now and continue to refine it with what I've heard, if that's the direction that council gives. I obviously don't necessarily want to have a piece of junk. So if it's a piece of junk, let me know, and we'll go back to the drawing board. I don't know if that answers your question, Mayor.
It does. Thank you. Yeah, to sum that answer up, then is you would like to get something at least improved on the books right now. It's not a perfect document, but at least something going forward. We do have more questions. First, we have Council Member Grove, and then Elrod.
We haven't heard from everyone yet, and maybe we need to take a quick straw poll, but I would advocate that the direction that we give council is to add all the things we've heard from Carol Fay and Scott Mellon and Malin, and that would be included hopefully in the first draft. And I know you're anxious to get things on the books, but if you're looking for direction, I think myself, sounds like Jerry, Scott, and Carol are advocating these stricter guidelines. Yes, based on what we read in the article from the Denver Post, but what we want to do ideally is reduce, as I heard last night in the Planning Commission, opportunities for mischief that would not be for not help our consumers and our citizens and our property owners.
Great, thank you. Council Member Elrod, Driscoll, and then Milliman. And Fay again.
So I think what we want to make sure this addresses, and I think, it's been commented on by others here, is the problems and issues that we know have occurred within our city with our citizens. So we have to be pretty firm and on making sure that known is sufficiently addressed through this draft. So I agree with whatever form that needs to take, whether it's more restrictive language, as Carol suggested, or some other criteria, as Scott did. I have a couple of questions just for level of understanding. Reed, did I hear you say that when you develop a metro district, whatever costs you incur to develop the infrastructure, et cetera, that the metro district would not be subject to a use tax? Did I hear that correctly?
It depends on how it's being financed, but correct. Generally, they're tax exempt. So the materials that go into the infrastructure would not be taxable, or whatever it was that they were building.
That's definitely a lost revenue opportunity for us. And I would assume then the point saying there's a greater public benefit is essentially maybe the argument to say, in lieu of a use tax, there's a greater public benefit that we're providing to the community. So that greater public benefit also seems a little bit subjective. Okay. So I think that would need further refinement to really, perhaps how do we assign a value to that public benefit given we're not getting use tax from the development? And then the final question that I have is, you made a comment that what this document helps us to do is to understand and force the developer to answer the question, why do they need a metro district? So how would they, what would be the answer to that? Like, why is a metro district needed versus other financing mechanisms? Like, why do they have to take a metro district approach versus another approach to building roads, for example? How would that be answered?
That is a good question. I will, perhaps Peggy would like to weigh in on typical public benefits. I know the argument will be out there that if you put in a metro district, you've added some sort of, whether it's walkability, some sort of, whether it's another street connection, certain things that are open to the public, assuming that they've dedicated it to the city after they've built it. So by and large, when you talk about what a public benefit is, it's like, well, you have an opportunity to use these roads or these paths or whatever it is. But perhaps Peggy can chime in on, put her development hat on, and explain to us, I guess, what would be a typical answer that at least you've seen with, the over 100 some odd metro districts that you're involved in and Pinnacle's involved in.
Yes, thank you. So those reasons vary, but they range from heavy amenities like pools and much more landscaping and monumentation, to rec centers and pools, to the cost of development. So we're hearing now about the huge cost of water in some of those development elements, and that it is a necessary part of getting the development done. Also, one of the big ones is it's spreading out that cost of infrastructure. So rather than a homeowner paying the $30,000 or so up front, that is financed over 30 years, at a tax exempt rate. So, highly likely someone's not going to own their house for 30, but they might. But they wouldn't have had to. So there's an affordability element that enables the district. Maybe there are some long-term amenities that the district would maintain rather than the city. So it relieves the city of that burden. Those are the kind of examples that we see.
Great. Karina, is that good? All right. If we could go to Council Member Driscoll, then Milliman.
Yes. Reed, if you would address where you got some of this information from. I mean, this is pretty boilerplate information, I would think. And to Scott's comments, he wants to, make it more specialized to Littleton. But would you just give us a little history? I should say not to Littleton, but just more consumer protection. And I would be in favor of taking this draft and implementing it sooner than later, and then let's get into a study session. Scott gave some very valid points as to what he'd like to see change, as did Carol, and some of the wording, and then let's get into it. But I would rather get something on the books rather than leave it the way it is and wait for the if the insert property, South property, decides to do something. At least we have something more potent than what we have today.
Councilmember Driscoll, I would say, as far as kind of the history or background behind the policy, there is a state statute, and the state statute is what it is. There's basically 6 evaluative criteria for approving a metro district. If you check all the boxes, if their pro forma shows that they have the financing available, then you approve it. That's if a municipality doesn't come in and draft their own ordinance with their own land use powers. What you will see in a lot of jurisdictions is, I would say sometimes it's like Littleton, and maybe Peggy can jump in, where there isn't really a policy behind it, any criteria behind it, or it's pretty minimal. In terms of this policy, I looked all over and modeled it off of a lot of what I had seen, kind of what best practices were, at least at that time. And I think where you see probably the predominant use of metro districts right now, and up on the northern part of the state, you see a lot of it up in kind of Loveland and Windsor, as mentioned, Fort Collins, Greeley, up in that location. Peggy, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add regarding your experiences having dealt with other municipalities and their proposed or their current metro district policies or ordinances.
I think this one proposed is very similar to those. I think it's been very helpful to those cities that haven't had a policy, at least to benchmark the important things. And that, you're right, there is a lot of standard language, and that is true across the board. So this policy proposed to you is very, very similar to the hundreds that we've seen. And that language does somewhat come from the statute, recognizing the different powers of the district. The teeth in this service plan is there's a few. The mill levy cap, which is combined cap between debt and O&M, and there's also an operations and maintenance cap. The term of the debt, the interest rate. So those are kind of the teeth. And then, of course, your requirement for what the annual report is. What do you want to see? What do you want to know? There was some idea in there. Tell us about your development. Tell us financially where you stand. Are you paying your debt on time? That kind of thing. I think that this form of government, just like the city, is a stronger form of government and financed with property taxes. That's a much more dependable source of revenue. So what we've seen is the long-term benefits. We've been doing these districts for almost 20 years. And the long-term maintenance and upkeep that it keeps the development going has been huge. Yes, there has been a high mill levy for infrastructure. And again, the original developer made a case for that was required. But this service plan proposed by Reed shows all of those different elements, and you can obviously change those to your satisfaction, but it's pretty comprehensive in covering all the different powers and issues that might come up with the districts.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Council Member Millman and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Reed, I want to thank you for spending all that time and effort putting that draft policy together. And I agree with Patrick that, sorry about my cat, that we should probably get this adopted sooner rather than later, so that we can avoid the issues that we've had in the past with some of the metro districts. And then Karina asked a question that I was interested in: why a metro district versus another form of financing. So thanks for asking that question. And this might be a question for Peggy. I know Scott said that the city of Littleton is built out. We don't have a lot of land left to develop. So is it still necessary to have metro districts aside from the inter-property in a city like the city of Littleton? I'm just curious. And then also, with regards to our draft policy, if we do make the language more stricter, we add more restrictions, what kind of developers would we attract and which ones would we not attract?
Do you want me to take that one, Reed?
Yeah, and I guess in your wonderful answer that is to come on that one, I know that Mayor Pro Tem had brought up kind of 50 mills, and some of, at least what I've heard from council say is, maybe that's too high. And so in your response to Councilmember Milliman, if perhaps you could address the mill issue.
Sure. Let me start with that. What we've seen, and if you're familiar with the Gallagher amendment, what we've seen is residential property being assessed at an extremely low rate now, 7.15%, while commercial remains at 29%. So even this funding through a metro district and property taxes, the capacity has gone way down. So we're seeing mill levies proposed a cap sometimes of 70 mills or higher right now, just to offset, especially in only residential, just to offset what's happening out there with the assessed valuations just going lower and lower. I think the type of development, again, you've made it pretty clear that it's up to the developer to prove why or to tell you why they need that. I think what we see this as is a public-private partnership. So the Denver Post had a lot of bad players, and unfortunately, it doesn't talk about the 97% good players. So that's the way journalism works. There's a lot of good players out there. There's good partners. You have perhaps national home builders coming to you. So pay attention to who that partner is, and that's who you want to work with. You always have the option to say no, or if they come in with an idea that's different than the model that Reed has proposed here, then you say, explain why you need more or something different. But to have a base is a great way to start.
Thank you very much. Anything else, Kelly? Okay. All right, we'll go to Mayor Pro Tem and then Elrod.
Yeah, I mean, I of course agree that we need to put something in place sooner rather than later. But what I want to put in place is something far more restrictive than the draft that's in front of us now. I think the approach that we took to the downtown is applicable here, where we put in place moratoriums as a way to protect ourselves for now, and then we can become more lenient if that's the policy direction we want to take going forward. I think we need to do something similar now. What I would say about the standard language is that it was developed during a time when the issues around metro districts were flying under the public radar. Now that a lot of the issues have been exposed, and I don't agree. I do not agree that the Denver Post article is some kind of sensationalist journalism or some kind of misreporting or some kind of fake news. I think that we have to be restrictive. That language is no longer reliable. We have the benefit now of I think sound investigative journalism, and in addition to that, the very bad experience the city has had with Littleton Village. We know that the standard language is not going to protect us from the possibility of getting a bad actor in here, and it's no discredit to the 97% or however many percent of developers aren't going to abuse the processes, but we have to be risk averse in these situations, because our responsibility isn't to protect developers, it's to protect our citizens and end users and homeowners. And the amount of work I think that Reed's going to have to put in to reduce the mill levy and reduce the loan term and protect from avoiding the loan term caps by simply refinancing and changing. I mean, it's not going to take him forever. I mean, it's not like a huge amount of work. He can still get a draft in front of council with those restrictions, and Carol's language too. I had that same thought when I was reading it, right? The language is definitely in need of enforceability. That's not going to take a tremendous amount of effort. We can still get that draft in front of us and get this passed, within the next however many few weeks. I think just the tentative calendar that we have in front of us now. That's my perspective.
Thank you very much. Council Member Elrod.
There was a comment regarding a service plan and dictating what is on that service plan. Would something like a resident survey or quality of service metric be something that could be incorporated into that? Because again, this isn't about saying, here's what we're going to do, but it's making sure that the follow through is there. So I don't know if that's something that can be considered to ensure a high level of service. Another example is, what's the level of maintenance expected of roads or sidewalks and things like that. We have that for ourselves. So now we do, or we're working towards. So, would those be types of things that we can add in there that, of course, meets Littleton's minimum requirements, but should likely exceed Littleton's minimum requirements? That's why they're paying a higher tax. Okay, here's my question, Reed. Can a metro district have an expiration date? Let me say this differently. So when we, the city council, have approved a metro district, but the development happens 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road, whatever it may be, situations change. So is there an expiration that when council approves a metro district, they have a certain period of time that they have to execute on that project for that metro district to still be valid?
It depends. I would say, and I would say Peggy would probably tell you that what she's seeing more and more of is metro districts continuing for longer than just the payment of the debt because of the operations and maintenance expenses that they take on. I think one thing that maybe gets used interchangeably is developer and metro district. So depending, and this may be one of the issues that's come up with Littleton Village, is I don't know what's exactly in the development agreement, but depending on how you've set it up, a metro district can actually take on the construction aspects of it, or they can be used as the financing mechanism to help the developer with the developer's construction of those particular improvements or amenities or whatever it is that they put in place. So I guess to answer the question, yes, you can. I'm sure that Peggy could chime in and tell us about metro districts that have paid off the debt, which was the purpose of the metro district. They didn't take on any operations and maintenance or whatever those improvements were. They turned those over to another service or to a city or a town for them to maintain. So there is kind of a timeline on it. So Peggy, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Actually, be a little bit more specific. We approved a metro district. The development has not occurred, and don't know when that development and thereby the service plan that was attached to that development would come to fruition. But a year down the road or 2 years down the road, our basis for making that decision may be null and void, right? So how long does that component of our role as council?
Right, and I would say perhaps that language is better served in a development agreement because the developer is the one that's in charge of phasing. So the idea of we want commercial in before we want the residential, or you have 2 years to bring in X or Y or Z, that's on the developer, not the metro district. Does that answer the question?
The situation, and Jennifer, maybe you can help me out here. The situation is we approved normally the development plan is approved, and then then there's a request for a metro district financing. And in this case, we actually approved the metro district financing before a development was approved. And so again, my point is that development never occurred or occurs 5 years later, but the condition in that area may have changed 5 years from now, and therefore that metro district financing decision may be different at that point in time.
Your bottom line is, it sounds like, Karina, you want to know, does our decision sunset at some point?
Yeah.
So a couple different options on this, and Peggy can weigh in. So I remember when we set up the River Park district, there is something in there if the development substantially changes, and I believe it's council can have that determination and say the development has substantially changed, so we need to look at this metro district again. We need to look at aspects of that. But Peggy, you probably need to explain the logistics of that. But I think, Karina, what you're referring to, so in the development world, if we get an approved site development plan, for example, and nothing happens on that for a certain, like 2 years, it expires, it goes away. I don't think that is necessarily the case for a metro district. Peggy?
Yes, I'll add to that. We have seen a few cities insert some language that says, if you don't issue debt, say in the first 5 or 10 years, that these powers are further limited, or you have to come back to city council. So that's kind of, I think, addressing your concern that we're going to give you the metro district as an incentive, really, to help you with your development. Now, things happen in the market. So I have seen that lately. You could do that.
Okay. Let's go ahead. We have two more council members that have questions. And then at that point, let's try to get to a decision on what direction we want to give at this point. So right now we have Council Member Grove and then Faye.
I was going to suggest that we be very clear about the direction that we're giving to staff. And it sounds like the majority of council wants to go in the direction of taking a little bit more time and getting it right and being more consumer focused with everything that we've talked about. I would suggest two additions. In addition to what Carol said about more teeth in the language, I would advocate that the remedy section be more clear in terms of what happens for non-compliance. And I would also suggest that we put in some sort of expiration date and not something 5 or 10 years out, something within, if you don't implement this within a year, you have to come back to council, so that we aren't dealing with changing conditions and having to abide by a decision that is no longer appropriate.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Council Member Faye.
Again, because of my experience with Littleton Village, I'll ask this to Peggy. Can we require a metro district to over a certain number of its seats to residents rather than keeping them developers or other paid professionals?
No, in the same way that you can't do that for city council, metro districts work the same way. However, there are limitations, by the way, on what board members are paid, and it's $100 a meeting. So that piece, unless there's some different way people are being paid, we don't really see that often. We do see, which Reed addressed, is the financing district versus the service district, and some control by a smaller district. Now the city, this is kind of a double-edged sword. So the city probably would like that development to go how the developers proposed and how you all have agreed in the development agreement. And if those board members are not developers, then that may not go the way that you all have envisioned it between the development agreement, the developer, and the city. So there's pros and cons, but really a homeowner is eligible to be on the board as soon as they buy property and they're a Colorado registered voter. We have many districts who have been around 15, 20 years. It's been open. There's been homeowners in there for that time. We have one actually near where I live, 18 years it's been in existence. We've had our first homeowner. And that we have also, advertised and done all of the public things to make sure people know that elections are being held. So you can't really make people serve on the board. It's not like an HOA where it's turned over per se. So it's not quite run like that.
Thank you. We'll go to Council Member Driscoll. Then I'm going to ask for a direction at that point. So Council Member Driscoll.
Yes. Pam mentioned a 1 year, mentioned having a 1 year. I don't think that's a realistic time frame to incur debt or to issue debt. What do you typically see as a reasonable amount of time to issue debt?
So we actually are seeing some debt if the developer is, very organized, has a plan of action, has a good reputation. The market is willing to buy that debt in the first couple of years. If development isn't forthcoming or it's not a real strong developer, that might take 5 or 10 years. So, yeah.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. Council, at this point, I would like to try to get to a direction on this. Reed, I know you were looking at our schedule to bring it back at our next regular meeting, which is August 8th, next Tuesday. But I think I'm hearing from council that they would like some adjustments. I know at our study session for August 8th is very full, which is also the same night as the regular meeting. Is this something that you could bring back on August 18th that maybe meet a lot of our concerns?
Yeah, whatever council wants.
Okay, yeah, city manager, does that throw a curve into your schedule at all?
Yeah, just listening to the conversation here and some of the concerns the council has expressed, I'd like to work with staff and our city attorney here to figure out what is the real strategy here and how we're going to approach some of the details. I do believe that some of which council touched on, there may be a better best management practice or a practical approach to that. It may not go as far as what some of council may have intended. And so we may have to look at a series of amendments that might be considered here. Because I think there's the detail of this is, in my opinion, is pretty difficult for the council to act on this evening anyways and give real clear direction. So long way to say, we're probably looking at August 18th coming back and sharing another version of this.
Okay, so council, at this point, it looks like the soonest it could come back would be August 18th. I'll start with Council Member Milliman. What are your thoughts on this? August 18th, okay?
I mean, I'd like to see this policy. I don't know if it can be pushed a little faster than August 18th. Like you said, we don't know when the developers for the southern end of the Inter property is going to make that request. I'd prefer to see this policy in place sooner rather than later. And then if you had to tweak it, like Reed said, we could tweak it later on once we understand more about the nitty-gritty part of this policy. But in order to avoid something like Littleton Village, I think we need to get something in sooner rather than later. And that's just my feeling.
Okay, so you're in favor of what's proposed. Go ahead, give them direction, use it now.
Yes.
And bring it back next Tuesday. All righty, so you would be in favor of, and we'll go to Council, Mayor Pro Tem, you had your hand up. Did you want to save yourself till last?
Yeah, sure, that's fine. I'll wait.
Great. All right, thank you very much. If we can go to Council Member Grove, where are you on this?
I'd rather get it done right and wait the extra week or two.
So you're okay with August 18?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to put you down for that. Then we'll go to, let's see, Council Member, where am I? Driscoll.
Yes, I'm okay with that, Jerry. Wait till the 18th. Maybe we put a moratorium in place to protect ourselves. I don't know if that's possible or not. I don't think we're going to get a request from anybody between now and the 18th, but if there's serious concerns out there that we will, then maybe we put a moratorium in place.
All righty. Council Member Fay.
I like the idea of a moratorium if we can do it, and let's take the time to strengthen that language.
So the 18th is
good.
Okay. Yeah, because the schedule allows for the 18th. Thank you. Council Member Elrod.
What is the 18th regular session? Like, would we be making a decision?
That would looks the 18th is.
It's both a regular meeting.
It's both
and a study session.
Yeah, our regular part is relatively short, but then we have some stuff that we're going to have a study session anyway. So it'd be back for a study session, is my guess.
So when would this get ready?
Yes, just clarification on that. We're talking about this coming back for a study session, not being a resolution at the regular meeting on the 18th. Is that what you're asking for?
Correct.
Okay.
All right. So is that
we don't reach a resolution on the 18th? That's a study session. The earliest we would get a resolution then would be what? Because does this require 2 readings?
Well, the soonest it could come back would be, let's see, the 18th. Yeah, it'd be beginning of September.
That would be the final resolution. It's just a
first reading.
First reading.
So this is just a policy, so it's a resolution. So only one reading is needed.
One reading. Okay.
Yeah.
So study session on the 18th. Karina, does that work for you?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm going to ask Reed. Reed, do you need until the 18th to make some of the, there were some pretty, conclusive recommendations that everybody was on board. Do you need until the 18th for some of those recommendations, or how do you feel about, coming back on the 8th with that so that we can actually pass this resolution on the 18th?
I guess if someone was going to ask my opinion, I don't want to come back for another study session and then have to come back again with a resolution. So I'd rather just come back with the resolution and avoid another study session. As far as how much time it takes me, I'm not as concerned with that in terms of needing, a few weeks to put in everything in place. It's just, as far as the future council direction, if this is a study session, are we going to talk about whether 50 mils is okay, or 49 mils, or 48 mils?
Yeah, and that's why we need another study session. Yeah.
As far as the future study session, I'm not sure if that's necessary. I think I've got pretty clear direction with what council wants of me. I don't know if I can, I can reduce the mills to whatever council wants. You could have 0 mills if you wanted to, or 1 mill. I mean, you won't get a development in here. You won't get the use of a metro district. And, depending on what council's direction is, maybe that would be preferable. So
let me do this, Reed. For right now, Karina, we're just looking at a study session on the 18th, and we'll go down a second. I'll go down a second question, or would you rather it be the regular meeting for a resolution? So, but right now, it sounds like you're willing to wait to the 18th, one way or another.
But I would like to see us go for a resolution on the 18th.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on. And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, I guess now I have a few questions. Is there a possibility of a moratorium around this issue so that we don't need to move quickly, or Reed, what do you think about that? And when would we even get to that? That would be first and second reading anyway, right? So that would, all right. Yeah, I'd like to see us go for a resolution on the 8th if possible. I don't see a reason to wait till the 18th. If that's the only alternative that's acceptable to council is some action on the 18th, I'd prefer that it not be another study session. I'd prefer that we act on a resolution, and we can have discussion, of course, on the sort of virtual dais at the regular meeting, and we can offer amendments as far as the amount of the mills and so on. I mean,
so where you are right now is that you're not in favor of passing or a direction to move forward with what we do have. So you and Karina, at least right now, would like to see a resolution on the 4th as our next regular meeting. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah, I'd like to see Reed make the changes I suggested, and then put it on the regular meeting agenda for resolution on the 4th. If that's not acceptable to council, then whatever the next date is, the 18th, but on the regular meeting agenda, not.
Yeah, I'd be willing to hear a resolution as well on the 8th with some changes in there. Of course, I'm going to go back to council. I'm going to go alphabetical order here. Councilmember Driscoll, are you in favor of bringing back a resolution on the 4th of August? That's next Tuesday regular meeting.
Yeah, that's the way I certainly. Again, I don't think we have anything pressing out there that's driving this, but yeah, the 4th is fine too. I think everybody made their concerns noted today. To go back into a study session, I think we can find something else to study. Thanks.
I'll go back to Councilmember Fay. Are you okay with the resolution on the 4th?
So long as we have a chance to have the language strengthened first. That's my concern.
Okay, great. Councilmember Grove.
The 4th would be great for resolution. And Reed, would you provide a red line instead of, just so we know exactly what's been changed as well as the final resolution?
You got it.
Great. All right, Councilmember Milliman.
Yes, okay, that's fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So we're all in agreement to bring back. The direction is to bring back the resolution as you have scheduled, but it's going to be a different resolution than what we have tonight. All right. So do you need any other information from us, City Attorney?
Just in regard to that date, is it going to be the 4th or the 18th in which you want that resolution?
Well, the next regular meeting is the 4th. and it's already on the schedule, but it'll be a different resolution than what you're proposing tonight. Well, at least it'll have many changes to it.
Jerry,
Then you have something, Jennifer?
Yes, if I may make a suggestion. So based on what we've heard this evening, if Reed and I make those changes and put it forth to you all in a memo, that would go out to you all by Monday. And then we have the resolution for the regular meeting on the 18th, I think would be a bit more realistic.
Yeah, it's the way that our council packet works, and generally it needs to be in by Thursday.
Yesterday. And we would have had to have all this in by yesterday, actually last week, technically.
So you're saying the date of the 4th for that resolution does not work. And I know City Manager wants to chime in at this point too.
Okay.
Please.
Yes, please, Mark.
Yeah, actually, that was going to be my comment. I don't think the 4th is practical for the scale of the work we're talking about. The staff is pretty well committed here for a series of other things, getting the packet ready, and for us to work with the city attorney to get a red line out. I think it's just really pushing it.
Okay.
So here's, and I'm sorry to complicate this, but I'm going to offer a different idea. Well, what we can do is have a study session on August 11th. That's already scheduled for a study session. We can work with staff and the attorney, lay out all the changes, and then you can act on it formally at the regular meeting on the 18th. To me, that's practical.
That gives it proper time, I think, too. So we're going to the 18th. I know, Scott, you had something you want to add?
Yeah, I guess Jennifer and Reed, what's the likelihood that we get a request for something to do with the Metro District between now and the 18th of August?
Slim to none. And I think, Reed, you want to chime in on pending ordinance doctrine instead of a moratorium?
Yeah, I think that the time that would be involved with passing the moratorium, we're not really getting anything on that with having to go to two readings unless it's an emergency.
Does that apply to resolutions though? Pending
or it's a pending resolution doctrine.
Yeah.
I think anytime that you're making a land use type decision, then the pending ordinance doctrine can apply, whether it's by resolution or ordinance.
All right. So right now you're looking at bringing it back on the 11th with study session, which is a full night, but I think we can work it in. So bring it back on the 11th and then resolution on the 18th. Council, is there anybody opposed to that schedule? I think that's good. You got your direction.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to move on to our next item. Thank you very much for joining us also, Ms. Dowell. All right. So we're going to move on to, let's see, on the study session topic 1B, ID 20-178 Citizens Initiative regarding the sale of retail marijuana in the city of Littleton. And this is basically just going to be an update, so we don't need to give direction on this. So, City Manager.
Yes, correct. I may call upon Colleen Norton, our city clerk, to give you kind of a quick update, but we've had a city petition circulating here for recreational marijuana, and the clerk's office has been busy counting that. And so we have an update to share with you on where that stands. Then I think I'm going to lean on Reed Betzing here, our city attorney, to kind of share with you, what does this really mean? What are the options here? I'll just tell you right now, the vote count is inconclusive and we need a second round of review. But so that's the intent. Little update from the clerk's office. And then our city attorney is going to share kind of what are the options that are going to be facing us here in the coming months. So with that, Colleen, would you please give council just a brief update on where you're at?
Absolutely happy to. Good evening, council. 2 weeks ago, we started reviewing signatures on the petition, myself and 2 other staff members. The Citizens Initiative did come in with over 7,000 signatures on it. They need 4,419 in order to move it forward to the ballot. We did complete our first round of verifications late today. The numbers are very close, and so I'm not confident deeming it sufficient or insufficient until I've personally had an opportunity to go back through and review those petitions that were reviewed by other staff members than myself, just to look at signatures that were disqualified and the reasons why, and see if I can't, maybe they were disqualified because they were illegible or something like that. See if there's another way that I can't verify those signatures before I deem this either sufficient or insufficient. I have committed to the city manager to have that second round of review done by Friday. And I have been working on that during your Metro Districts conversation. So I'm about halfway done with it already. And I have re-verified 35 additional signatures. So at this point, they're much closer than they were an hour ago. That's where we are in the clerk's office with it right now.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So I guess what this means for council right now is, whether or not the signatures are verified, that governs whether or not this is going to be on the November election. If for some reason we were unable to verify all the signatures that were required, the petitioners still have extra time. They have 180 days from when they got their petition signed. So this would be probably through December, or the middle of December, in order to, if there's a deficiency in the signatures, to continue to collect those. That would then mean a special election would be occurring probably sometime in February. There is a cost, obviously, whether it goes on the November ballot, whether it goes next year in February. And it's, somewhere around $45,000 probably, maybe $60,000 just to have the special election on this particular ballot initiative. Assuming that it was verified, the signatures council has a couple options. One of the options would be to go ahead by ordinance, and you can just adopt the matter on its own. If for some reason this is something that council wanted to do, which would be to allow for existing medical marijuana centers to sell retail, that's something that council could just go ahead and adopt, forego the actual election. Or council can send this to the voters to find out what the voters would decide. I would say in 2013, the voters of the city did allow for an additional tax on retail marijuana, but this item has never come before these particular voters in terms of a local matter. Obviously, it was a state issue with Amendment 20 and Amendment 64. So that's where we're at right now.
So I think what I heard you say then, one is that by Friday, we'll have a final count. It'll either be either enough signatures or not enough signatures. And we can anticipate it coming back in February. That's at a cost. It's going to cost us one way or another. But February, it's going to be a single issue item, it sounds like. The other one, Reed, I think I heard you say we could wait till Friday, then next Tuesday, say we could give direction on whether or not to send it to the voters in November, or council makes its own decision. Is that correct?
Yeah, if the signatures are verified and they have the signatures, you've got two options. Send it to the voters is one option. The second option is take exactly what their ballot measure says, which is allow for existing MMCs to sell retail and just adopt it by ordinance. So those are the two options.
And then you could come back later with another ordinance to outline the administrative piece that would dictate rules regarding retail marijuana in the city.
Council Member Driscoll?
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on this. One is my personal opinion on this is it's too big of a topic to pass amongst the seven of us. I personally like to see it on the ballot. And then Reed, who picks up the cost for that that ballot issue or that ballot cost? Is that a city or is that the group that's trying to get it passed?
It comes out of Mark's paycheck. So
Again?
that's on the city, yes.
So,
Got it, Pat? Okay, we'll
Yep.
go to council member Elrod.
I agree with Pat. It's too big of an issue, and for it to be a decision amongst ourselves as council. And the purpose of the petition is to get it on the ballot. It's not a vote in favor or against from whoever might have signed the petition. So they get the count, then that's where it belongs. And then just clarifying the cost. So if it goes on the November ballot, it's 45,000. If it's a special election, it's 65,000. It's not some number like that. There's a difference in the cost, but either way, there's a cost. Is that correct? What I heard?
That is correct.
You made a comment regarding ballot language. So do we have, assuming they get the signatures, assuming it goes on the November ballot, just to stick with simplicity, do we have, you stated, if the petition is deemed sufficient, let me read this, referring the ballot question to the voters will be heard, second reading, the final date to provide ballot language to the counties is September 4th. So do we have the ability or opportunity to inform what that language is going to be that's going to the counties, or who's structuring that language?
That language is part of this petition that went out, the citizens petition, the citizens initiative. So they have already formed that ballot language. That being said, when they first submit any citizens initiative, the clerk's office and the attorney's office reviews their proposed ordinance / ballot language to make sure that it is single in nature. It can only be a single issue, and that it is legislative in nature only, and that there is no attempt to include any kind of administrative function behind that. And so the ballot language is already set. If this is referred by council to the ballot, it goes as is, as was presented on the petition.
Can you send that to us, please, Kelly?
It is included in your packet in that communication. It's a very simple question, and I'm happy to share it with you now.
I see it, that first line, shall existing medical
Yes,
marijuana.
that is the ballot question.
And then the second comment that's in the memo is that if the ballot measure is successful, so let's say it is successful in November, hopefully not, but we will have an opportunity to make further changes to the existing ordinance before the effective date. So the effective date would be January 1st, 2021. So we can make other necessary ordinances within. Mm-hmm.
Right. You would at that point have to bring forward the administrative piece for the code so that we could update the code to allow retail, discuss numbers, zoning, hours of operation, licensing requirements, those kinds of things.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Scott, you lowered your hand. You no more question, or?
No, I just wanted to clarify that this is coming out of the general fund. If we have to finance a special election at the same time that Mark's furloughing staff and we had to engage in an early retirement program and on and on. It's just a drag that we might have to take that cost on.
Well, if it's in November, is the CARES Act, would that be able to pay for any of it? I guess no, it wouldn't.
So that may be something that we're going to have to talk to the county on. I know that the election or special election it's more costly now because of COVID, because of the restrictions that they need to put in. So we will take a look at what that, it's going to be kind of a guesstimate, Mayor, in regard to what that incremental increase was over what a typical special election would have cost to what it's costing now because of COVID. And that's an opportunity to potentially get back some of those monies or recoup some of those monies.
And the same goes for a coordinated election. The fees are going to be higher in the coordinated election in November or a special election because there is a piece that's specific to safety measures due to COVID. But even in a normal coordinated election between the three counties, we're looking at well over $40,000 to $50,000.
Great. Councilman Driscoll, you still have your question?
Yeah, it just seems to me that I want to make sure I'm clear. Just because we're adding this to the ballot, assuming that the signatures get approved, it's not the fact that we're adding an additional thing to the ballot. It's what an election costs in November. Am I understanding that correctly?
It's our portion of the election.
Okay, so we're going to have a $45,000 bill regardless whether this is on the ballot or not.
No, if we were not coordinating anything on the ballot, we would not pay anything towards this election.
Gotcha. Is this the only thing we're thinking might be on the ballot?
For us, yes.
Okay, that helps me. Thank you.
Great. Council Member Milliman.
So just an update to everybody. If you aren't aware, but the Arapahoe County Commissioners voted today to allow recreational sales in unincorporated Arapahoe County. And it's just for their 4 existing stores. They're not adding any new stores. And so that just means there's more recreational sales closer around us. And I would hate to, personally, I would hate to miss out on that sales opportunity since we already have existing medical marijuana stores within the city of Littleton. You know, I think I would be interested in an ordinance going forward, but I'm just not sure the pulse of council is with me on that one. Let the citizens speak in November then.
Council Member Elrod.
Oh, I was just going to go back to Colleen's comment. So, and this is irrelevant now, but so if we had multiple things on the ballot, it would still just be the 45,000. It's not that it's 45,000 for each question that we put on there.
No, we would be charged based on the number of items on the ballot. Yeah, it's exponential. It's not just a flat rate because we're sharing the cost in the printing of the ballot, the mailing of the ballot. There's return mail fees, there's election judges, all of those kinds of things that play into this. And it's my understanding that this ballot already is in the double digits as far as pages go. It's going to be a very heavy ballot.
Yeah, so the point is there for a council is that if the election's in November, it's a shared cost of whatever it is. But if it's a single issue in February, it's a City of Littleton bears the entire cost, which may be $45,000.
Just for some perspective, the special election that we did in 2015 around urban renewal was $60,000.
Yeah, so 45 is just an estimate at this point. Could be more.
And that's just Arapahoe County. I haven't had the estimates for Douglas or Jeffco yet.
Which will add on to that 45 for
Correct.
Sure. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, if the finance director's on tonight, could ship me information about what the sales tax revenues might be to the city if this thing does end up passing. And a related question for Reed is, does the city council have any authority to affect that excise tax rate? And this is a strange question, but it keeps rattling around in my brain. Is there any issue around constitutionality here? It seems like this would be a sort of state-sanctioned monopoly for the existing medical dispensaries to suddenly be the only ones allowed to do recreational marijuana. I mean, if the voters pass it, I'm going to want the most efficient operators in the city getting us the most sales tax revenues they possibly can.
So I know Tiffany has been warned that there may be a revenue question. So I'll let Ms. Hooton answer that one, and then we can talk about the other parts to your comments, Mayor Pro Tem.
Sure. What I can share with you is some information that's been provided from the group that initiated the citizen initiative. And based on some of the information they provided, they estimate with the 3 operational medical marijuana facilities that are current today, that it could be around $1 million for just those 3 stores. So if we had a 4th one that was operational, they're indicating it could be about 1.25 million. And that's being conservative on the 3 assumptions that they provided. What I would be cautious about is I would probably err on the even more conservative side and probably look at probably $500,000, maybe $600,000 in additional revenue to the city. And that's on an annual basis.
All right. Well, thank you, Council. If we don't have any other questions, I guess where we are right now was Friday. It looks like Pro Tem will, but we Friday is when we're going to know for sure if there's enough numbers for this, put it on the ballot. At that point, it's going on the ballot in November. Correct, Reed?
Yeah, I was just gonna, if I may, answer Mayor Pro Tem. He had a couple other additional
yes.
questions. So the first was, does council have any control over that 3%? I believe that's the question, the 3% additional sales tax. That I don't think is a charter amendment. I think that was direction from the voters to put that into our city code. So I would say yes, the city would have some control over that. As it relates to the idea of granting existing MMCs this kind of monopoly, if you will, it doesn't preclude, at least the ballot language right now, would not necessarily preclude the city from not having additional locations or deciding to have additional locations or separate recreational, or we're calling it retail marijuana facilities. So that would be part of the administrative ordinance sections that would come back to city council, that city council could take a look at. In regard to the 4 existing or the 4 medical marijuana centers right now, part of it and some had to do with some of the restrictions that we currently have in place regarding where they can be situated. So we have restrictions as it relates to how far away it could be from a school, how far away it can be from a park, the type of zoning would come into play, how far it could be away from a child care facility. So when you start building out kind of those circles, if you will, on a map of the city of Littleton, you come into only really a few different locations on where those are viable. One of the questions, whether or not this makes it or not, that council may want to take a look at, that I know staff has had some challenges with, is taking those, it can't be within 1,000 feet of, an existing park. Perhaps adding some definitions to what exactly a park is. Is it just a green space, or is it an actual park? Some of those limitations come into play, as well as those surrounding jurisdictions. So, for example, the city of Inglewood has a park. Well, that restricts where any of these centers could actually go. Is that something that this council wants to do, to take into account what's going on in a different jurisdiction and how that affect where our business licenses can be placed? So that'll all come into play at some point, I suppose.
Anything else, Scott?
Is this group doing this anywhere else? In particular, our neighbors? I mean, is this happening in Centennial or?
I have not heard of any other citizens initiatives in neighboring jurisdictions with the same issue.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, you're not looking for a direction. That was an update. Let us know come Friday how things turn out.
Will do.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to our third item, which is topic 1C, CARES Act follow-up. And there you are looking for some direction on how to proceed. So we'll turn it over to the city manager.
All right, Mayor, thank you. So a couple of weeks ago, council asked that we bring back a couple of items. One is the business recovery grant. And so we will share with you again the work that we've done collectively with the other cities within the county and then the county itself. So that's kind of basic premise behind the business recovery grant. The other piece too we want to touch on is whether or not the council has interest in funding through the CARES Act some nonprofit assistant grants. And Denise Stevens, our economic development director, and Tiffany Hooton been working pretty closely together on trying to present this material. So I know that Tiffany has a presentation. And so with that, I'm going to suggest that Tiffany, perhaps you start us there and lead this conversation.
Sure. All right. So before you this evening, we just have kind of a follow-up and an update on the two items that Mark mentioned. We're going to go over the phase 3 business grants, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the nonprofit assistance grant program, and then some recommended actions from us for council. The phase 3 business grant, we presented this on July 14th as part of the phase 2 of the CARES Act funds. And we wanted to bring back some information specifically related to those grants. A couple of things are, we have two kind of programs. We have the business interruption grant, and that would allow funding of up to $10,000 for businesses. And then we also have the infrastructure and PPE grant, and this would allow up to $20,000. The total amount that we are proposing for this phase 3 of the business grants program is $375,000. And I think with that, I would ask Denise Stevens to kind of jump in and talk a little bit more about that particular program.
Good evening, City Council. I will give you just a little bit of history. Back in April, when City Council wanted to initiate a grant program to provide assistance to our businesses suffering from economic impacts of COVID, we did pretty extensive research on what other cities were proposing. And we compiled eligibility and ineligibility information based on looking at what other cities were doing. And so phases 1 and 2 of that grant, this was pre-CARES Act, were based on some pretty well thought out parameters. And so then fast forward, CARES Act comes into play, and we started working with our partners. So we started to formulate things working with Centennial, Inglewood, Greenwood Village, Aurora, and Arapahoe County. And Arapahoe County had actually formulated the basis of their grant program on what we'd already developed in Littleton. Likewise, when we were working with these cities, and they were impressed with what we'd already created. So we all formulated what we came up with based on what we'd started with the city. So I'm going to share my screen and let you take a look. I just need somebody to give up theirs. Okay. Hang on just 1 second, please. So can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the foundation of the business recovery grant. And this has already been pre-approved by Arapahoe County. So the business interruption grant will be provided to eligible businesses for operating expenses, including but not limited to lease, mortgage payments, payroll, inventory, supplies and equipment, and other things necessary to operate business. And that is up to $10,000, as Tiffany said. The business infrastructure and PPE grant, and these were combined based on a recommendation from the county, would allow businesses to submit receipts for safety equipment that they had already paid for and get reimbursed. And also included would be larger efforts to follow safety regulations, infrastructure improvements, anywhere from plastic dividers up to adding a drive-through. So, pardon me. So based on that, we ended up with these eligibility requirements. Anyone applying needs to be licensed with the City of Littleton. The business license should be issued no later than October 1st, 2019. They must have a physical address within Littleton, be a business in good standing, be current with their tax returns, have no code violations, etc. Be a for-profit, privately held business, have between 1 and 100 full-time employees, have those positions prior to the COVID pandemic. Businesses that have been forced to temporarily close or forced to dramatically limit operations due to COVID, and able to demonstrate economic injury of 25% or more in revenue loss during COVID pandemic. Now, I've highlighted this because there's been some discussion that some cities that have already launched this program haven't seen that many applicants, and they're concerned that that percentage may be too high. So that is something that we could lower if council's interested. So the ineligible businesses would be home-based home occupations, national chains, and the exception would be locally owned franchises, publicly traded companies, businesses deriving more than 1/3 of their gross annual revenue from legal gambling, businesses engaged in any illegal activity, marijuana businesses, both medical and recreational, any sexually oriented businesses. And then basically the prohibited use of funds are consistent with what everybody chooses to exclude or to allow. So then the second program, and Tiffany, do you want to go forward with your presentation before we look at the nonprofit, or shall I go forward with the nonprofit?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and go to the next slide if you're ready for that.
All right.
So the next program that council wanted a little bit more information on was related to nonprofits. And so we've developed a nonprofit assistance grant. And this grant it varies based on annual revenues of the individual organization with a max of $10,000. When we talked with council about this on July 14th, we had indicated an amount of $100,000, but after reviewing and understanding the additional needs, we are advising to increase this to $200,000. And Denise, if you want to go ahead and go through that one.
Okay. Okay. Now, this is our nonprofit assistance grant, and a lot of this has been based upon what Inglewood has already managed to get pre-approval from the county on. So we're looking at that 200,000, and we had decided that we would have tiers for potential grant awards because—
Sorry, Denise, to interrupt, but your screen is not shared.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sure what's going on here. Hang on a second. Oops, I'm sorry. That's not what I wanted. Oh, pardon me. Okay. So now can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize. Let me make it full screen so you can see it easier. So again, we've tiered these potential awards. So just some background. We have 25 nonprofits within the city boundaries. And if we exclude churches per se, then we have 15 that would be eligible. And some of those, and you'll see based on eligibility, would have smaller budgets. So we didn't want to create an exclusion based on a smaller budget. So we have these tiers related to their total annual budget. So the program, as with others, would be based on first come, first served, those that meet all eligibility requirements, organization's annual revenues or budget, and a demonstration of economic injury. Then we're asking for documentation of citizens and or businesses served within the city of Littleton. And that, in our opinion, should be at least 10% of the total population served. So as you know, nonprofits serve people in and outside the city. we think it's reasonable to ask that at least 10% of those served be within our boundaries. And then we're saying having a physical location and public accessibility within the city of Littleton. So no home-based. Pardon me. Eligible organizations would be those providing human services, those that deal with arts and culture, charitable organizations, fraternal organizations, and business organizations, only those not making political contributions. The not eligible would be religious institutions, political organizations, and home-based nonprofits. And then the various city managers met with the county, and they worked out with the county that requests for mortgage, rent mortgage, and or food program assistance be submitted directly to the county. So those would be things that we would direct to Arapahoe County rather than consider for our own grants. And again, eligible uses of funds are listed below and are fairly standard. And then just required documentation. So Tiffany, do you have more slides that you want to move on to?
Yes, we can go ahead and talk a little bit about the additional nonprofit requests.
Okay.
So there are a number of nonprofits who have reached out to Littleton and just kind of explained to us, some of their needs and some things related to COVID that they're kind of interested in, hoping that the city can help fund some of these things. We talked on July 14th about Love Inc. and they reached out to a number of nonprofits in the Littleton area, and they kind of came back with three kind of themes of areas that they were interested in. One of them is the communications campaign, and this is just kind of helping families in the area understand what services are available in the community. And then also the homelessness and housing insecurity. Working with the homeless and trying to find housing for them. And then the other need was related to childcare. With parents at home and having to homeschool, there's some need for scholarships maybe to allow parents to work from home to make sure that they can keep their kids safe. And these are just examples of some areas that they would like to focus on. The other one is the Town Hall Art Center. They did reach out to us and provided a list of COVID-related items. Their list was well over $23,000, I believe, but looking at what was included and what I know for certain will be subject to CARES Act, it's about $16,800. And then the other part is the arts and culture. And we have Tim on the line who can kind of speak to these three areas or projects that are proposed. But I think, it was just important for council to understand that there are needs out there for nonprofit organizations and some of the things that they are looking to help in the community. So Tim, if you want to take a few minutes to just kind of touch on the arts and culture piece of that and the three projects that we mentioned here, the mural project, some window casing, maybe some pop-up gallery, and then concerts in the streets.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Just kind of a quick overview. Mark had asked me a couple of weeks ago to start looking at some possible projects that might be eligible for funding under the CARES Act. So my staff and I looked at three things that we thought would do a couple of things. One, probably most importantly, would have a direct impact into the arts and culture community. So it would, rather than funding organizations, this would mostly go to individual artists. One of the projects that we looked at and that Fine Arts Board has talked about for a number of years is a mural project, probably in the downtown area, although not necessarily specific to that. The budget for something like that is probably around $15,000, and that would include a commission to an artist who would put that mural in place, probably some work with the local business owners, a fair amount of prep and staging that would go into that, and then picking up the cost of supplies. That one's it's a little tough because of the timeline and the understanding that we need to expend these funds by the end of the year. But we think that we could probably get it in just under the wire with that project. Second one is really kind of a twofold strategy, and this would involve identifying a couple of potentially storefronts, one in the downtown area, maybe one in the Aspen Grove area, vacant storefronts, picking up the rent on those spaces for the balance of the year. And we're thinking September through December. And then bringing in artists who could showcase their artwork and also sell their artwork, so give them a venue. And we think particularly if we can partner that with, there's a revival of the Weekends on Main Street or something like that. It could be very profitable from both sides. One, it would obviously provide some sales revenue for working artists and also some rent for local property owners downtown. And then the third one is a concerts in the street idea. Kelly Nardi and I have talked a little bit about this in the past and about the possibility of pairing it up with dinner on Main Street or something like that. But essentially what we would do is work with individual artists, individual musicians, or with organized bands and groups and provide them with a stipend to do performances. You can do them, you do it on closed streets, obviously, those are available, but you can also do them in parking lots, parks, really any venue that allows for social distancing. So as I mentioned, the budget on the mural project is probably about $15,000. For the pop-up galleries, we're looking at around $56,000, $56,500 is about the number we've come up with. Based on the square footage rental cost in both the downtown area and in Aspen Grove. And then the final project, the Concerts in the Street, is around $20,000.
All right, thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tiffany.
So I think some of the recommended actions moving forward is staff is suggesting that we continue with the phase 3 business interruption grants. With the funding of $375,000, and to kind of just put it in perspective, phase 1 was about $150,000, phase 2 was $125,000, and phase 3 will be $375,000. So this is a total of $650,000 that we're putting back into the businesses to help them through this COVID issue. And also that would be about 15% of the total allocation to Littleton of $4.4 million. Additionally, we would like to go ahead and move forward with the nonprofit assistant grants, and this is funding for $200,000. The idea is that some of the needs that we just talked about might qualify for this nonprofit assistant grant program, and so some of those smaller organizations will be able to apply with the city and hopefully get and qualify for some of that nonprofit grant assistance. So a little bit more on the fiscal impacts. The allocation to Littleton is about $4.4 million. Phase 1 was $1,182,000. Phase 2, after we added the $50,000 related to cybersecurity that we talked about on July 14th, and then increase in the nonprofit assistance from $100,000 to $200,000. Phase 2 would include $1.5 million roughly dollars. Just a reminder, $990,000 of that is related to the City Council chamber reconfiguration, which we're going to be coming to you later in August to have some more detailed conversation about that project in particular. So if we move forward with phase 1 and phase 2, that'll leave about $1.7 million left of CARES money. And also on August 18th, I believe it is, when we come forward related to the $990,000 council chamber reconfiguration, we're also going to be providing the full list of all of the needs that were submitted, and we are continuously adding to that list as we go along. We'll be bringing that forward to council so you can really see some of the projects and needs that we've already identified. And we'll be bringing forward a phase 3 of spending of the CARES Act funds. And with that, we will go ahead and open it up for questions. I'm here, and Denise and Tim, and certainly Mark might have some comments to share as well.
Great. Well, I'll start the questions out, and then we'll go to Pro Tem. On the profits, I'm assuming these artists are for-profit qualifiers. But is there a problem with the ones that aren't renting a studio somewhere? If they work out of their home, wouldn't that make them home-based and not qualified to receive anything? Because I think it's a great idea to have them, especially on Main Street. But is that something that needs to be reworded to accept them? That's my first question. I have another one.
Is that directed to the mayor?
Yeah, because we're saying that for-profit and nonprofits, if they're home-based, they don't qualify. So if an artist isn't renting a studio outside their home, isn't that a glitch?
Yeah, it's a good point. Tiffany may want to address that. We could certainly tighten that language up. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I think the program itself would be a worthwhile program.
I understand.
I'm not sure about the cost, but I like the program. My other one is we're not allowing religious institutions, but yet the churches do have employees. They have programs. They have daycares. They have. They're having to go by the directives that they're being from Tri-County and from the state. Why not religious institutions? They're having to go by the same laws as everybody else.
If I may, part of the issue around taxpayer dollars going toward nonprofits is that they're wholly or in part tax exempt, and churches are generally wholly tax exempt. And then I don't, we certainly have to reach out to find out, but every city has pretty much, if they have a program like this, exempted churches because
well, I would like us to consider that because, again, they have employees. They're abiding by state laws, thank goodness, and county. But they have programs that are above and beyond religious stuff. Like I said, they have daycares. They have other programs that help out Littleton citizens. So I don't think they should be exempt.
Well, Jerry, a lot of these organizations, as you say, truly do have mission outreach, like Love Inc. Some of these organizations are religiously affiliated, and those are tied to churches. So those would all qualify.
But religious institutions would still not qualify.
Correct. Under the current ineligibility, churches would be exempt.
Reed, what are your thoughts on that? And then I'll turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem.
Sorry about that. I was tabbing through, actually trying to look up your question, Mayor. I thought that there was some specific prohibition against it out of the CARES funding, but if I may, give me a few minutes to take a look at that, and perhaps I'll be able to answer before we sign off tonight.
Okay, great. I appreciate it. And if not tonight, some other time, we'll go over to Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I had a few questions. The first is, I guess I'm wanting to have staff expand on the first come, first served model. I certainly understood that more back in March when we had an emergency situation on our hands, but at this point, couldn't we send it to a committee just to get a little bit more deliberation on who we're giving the money to and making sure that it's the best use of this money? So that's one question. A second question is, what are we doing to make sure that people who receive money the first time around, business grant money the first time around, aren't first come, first served now with our third round? And then the third question I have is, or I guess it's more of a concern around the two grant opportunities under the heading of our third business grant. So there's the business disruption and then the PPE. I don't want someone, I see sort of a worst case scenario here. I'm sure the chances of this happening are slim, but I do want to protect against it, where someone who's already gotten money just has their ducks in a row, is first in line, and gets not only the $10,000 business interruption money, but also, what was it, $20,000 PPE money, and takes essentially 10% of that fund. So just some thoughts.
Those are all great questions. And the first question is that we already do have a committee looking at all of these grants. We have several ways of verifying eligibility open at the time we're reviewing the applicants. And these are not going to have an open and stop time like we did with the first grant. we're going to open them and then leave them open. But if people come in and they meet the eligibility requirements and the committee is in agreement that they should be awarded grant funds, and we get to the point where all of those that we've received meet eligibility requirements and we approve funding, then those who submit after that would kind of be out of luck, unfortunately. Then, I'm sorry, your second question, Mayor Pro Tem, I apologize, was, you're muted, I'm sorry.
So now I can't remember. I'm trying to think. How can we ensure that people who already got money under our first and second rounds don't get money under the third before other people who haven't received money?
Okay, and again, built into our application process, because we talked to the county about this, we don't want to duplicate grant funds with the county. They've already received some applications for their allocation. So they give that information to us. And then every applicant is asked, what grant funding have they already received? That includes federal grant funding, that will include county grant funding, and that will include any grants received from the city. So we'll see, and this is self-certified, but we'll see up front what everybody's already gotten. And one of the things we've got to make sure that we don't give redundancy on is PPP. So if anybody is applying for payroll or employee retention and they've already received PPP through the federal program, then that is not part of what we can consider. So we do have several things in place that help us know what people have already received, and we won't duplicate those efforts. However, if somebody demonstrates additional economic injury where they have not, that doesn't duplicate the receipts or information they provided before, they could be considered again.
Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. We'll go to Council Member Milliman. And then Elrod.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments and then a question. And I'm going to respectfully disagree with the mayor on allowing some of the nonprofit grant money to go to churches. I think we need to be very careful about that. Keep church separate from state. These nonprofits that are more religious based are not spreading the message of any particular church. They're out there doing goodwill for the people, and so I think we need to be very mindful of that. I don't agree with that. The other thing too is I am hugely in support of the arts, supporting the arts in the city, especially given this time of COVID. Right now, with everybody's tension levels sky high, their anxiety is through the roof. There's a lot of uncertainty. We've been through a lot in the last, 4 short months. Allowing people to express themselves through art in our city is only going to increase our positive mental health overall. And it's not that much money for a lot of gain. And I think our city needs it desperately right now. And so I'm hugely supportive. And so my question is, I personally think, I'm very thankful that you increased the fund from 100 to 200K. But boy, if we could find some more money to pump into that nonprofit, that grant program, I would be very, very supportive of that. I don't know where that money is, but if it's somewhere laying around and we can put it into that grant, I think that would just be, it would be great for our city. So that's it.
Great, thank you. And since my name was invoked, I am pro religious institutions, and I think recent Supreme Courts are starting to show that as well. Let's see, we'll go to Council Member Elrod.
Thank you. And thank you for the work on this, Denise and others that have been involved. I've been asking for something to be much more strategic, and I think we're getting there. I am with the concerns that Scott conveyed regarding first in, first served. I don't think that is serving our businesses equitably. and also looking at the the criteria that we have here. It's much more complex, and there's a lot of really good information that we're seeking. And businesses are at different phases right now of trying to keep the doors open, maybe have to, lay off their accountant, whatever it may be. So I don't think that should be the criteria. What I would look at as, so the committee, as you talk about, Denise, now is really just kind of ticking off the box that they meet the eligibility. But I do think there is a further scoring element that, a 10,000 request here is not the same as a 10,000 request, from another business. We have our priority-based budgeting tool for those purposes to help even us discern where our priorities are. It doesn't mean that both of those are eligible, but we may need to make a choice because we have limited funds. So first in, to me, is not how the choice should be made. And I'd encourage us to maybe explore how priority-based budgeting or some other form of scoring can help there. With that, one addition that I would recommend as well, I think the infrastructure criteria that was placed in the business grant, I think that's a very critical one as we think about how to best use the funds long-term for some of these businesses. That infrastructure need can exist for the nonprofit organizations as well. So I think we should allow for infrastructure types of costs for nonprofits as well. And further, when you think about things like infrastructure, especially when you're talking in tens or $20,000, a business may not necessarily be able to, to do those infrastructures because it's probably much more than 10 or 20, but a property owner has a longer term interest in that. So a property owner may be able to put in a new HVAC system for their 3 units that they rent out to businesses, or they may be able to do, open up, garage door windows as opposed to the standard windows. So I think the property owners that serve businesses or organizations would be an important audience to bring into this as well. Again, falling under the same criteria of how it is to be used, but this is a way for the property owners to help enable the businesses to be successful. So I'd ask for those 2 things to be addressed or included, please.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Council Member Grove.
I have a couple comments. First of all, I agree with Kelly and Karina, a separation of church and state. I would say that churches should not be eligible. I am not an advocate of first come, first serve. I'd like to see the application period be open for a certain amount of time and closed and then given to the most eligible applicants. I would also like to see some more accountability beyond just a survey, like did it work? Did you like it? Did you use it? How did this help extend your business? Do you foresee being around at the first of the year? In other words, how effective were we? If we do get any more money or do this in the future, this would be a way to evaluate best practices and include them going forward. So we've talked a lot about a lot of different aspects of this, and I think it would be a good idea to summarize them and give direction based on all the comments we've heard, so we're real clear on the direction that we are giving to staff.
Thank you. Council Member Driscoll.
All good comments by all the other city council men and women. I would like to just reiterate what Kelly had mentioned, arts and culture. I too am in that court of helping Tim get a move on with getting people out and about, doing some things, all good suggestions. There might be some more room to do some other things, but I think it's a good start.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Fay, did you want to say anything?
I do have my hand up. And I want to make these comments. I'm really uncomfortable with what feels like looking for places to give money, like it seems like we might be doing now with the arts, when there are people out there who don't have enough to eat, don't have a place to live. And with what we are possibly have coming nationally with rent moratorium going away at the end of this month, and with unemployment that's federal and state, I know, getting reduced, I think it's unconscionable that we are looking to give money to things that aren't. I don't think arts and culture are essential. I think they're nice. I think they're wonderful, but I don't think they're essential like food and shelter. And I realize the county's responsible for that, yet we as human beings are responsible for other human beings. For the church thing, I'm really sorry that that is an issue before us. Love Inc. is an organization of faith-based communities. So that is very religious, and that seems to be on the top of our list. And so we have the religious communities covered there as far as they're helping the rest of the community. I'm puzzled, and I would like to hear from Denise, why are fraternal organizations on our list? How does that serve our community?
Well, actually, that was just something we borrowed from the existing architecture created by Inglewood. And if it's not something you want to include, we can certainly eliminate it. I actually thought about that myself. I think that fraternal organizations are probably still getting membership money. So I don't know how much harm would have come to them, but it's just something that had been in there, and it can be removed if council prefers.
I question what I would want if we gave to them is a very firm statement of what they're going to do for the community with the money we give them. Because they are private organizations, the general public cannot use them.
That makes sense.
And I think that's all. Thank you.
All right, we'll go to Councilmember Grove and then Milliman.
Yes, one point that I forgot to make that Carol reiterated. I kind of did a quick analysis of how much we're giving to business loans first and second, how much to the arts, and how much to Love Inc. or individuals. And the amount to individuals is like 10% of that chunk of money. It seems like it's really heavily balanced to business. And I would advocate, and I don't know what the proper mechanism is to distribute that money where it's needed directly to individuals. But I would like to see either an increase, or on the next round of what balance we have, we look at ways to help individuals that are hurting. I'm not against the arts. It's just that is a lot of money for the arts and compared to the amount we're spending on individuals.
Great. Thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Milliman.
I took my hand down, but I'll make my statement anyway. Just to clarify, going back to churches, Love Inc. is not a specific church. It's a nonprofit that consists of a number of churches that have a specific mission with helping families in need, but it's not a specific church like St. Mary's Church or other churches in town. Am I correct?
I know, Reed, you're looking to comment. Is that where you want to speak now?
Yeah, I was just looking through kind of some of the regulations that the CARES Act came out with. So essentially on its base, and I've heard a couple council members mention it, it's kind of that separation of church and state. It's basically the establishment clause, which prohibits the funding of religious entities. So I think that's where probably a lot of the other jurisdictions that are looking into their grant programs have kind of come on the side of being overly cautious and not trying to provide that direct donation for fear of it essentially running afoul of our Constitution. Mayor, I do think that you did bring it up that is kind of being eroded a little bit with this coronavirus pandemic that we've had, as I know that the Small Business Association has been giving out loans to cover salaries of certain church employees, but I would feel more comfortable with the SBA doing that than coming directly as a pass-through from a local government in this particular case.
Council Member Elrod. Thank you, Reed.
So Pam, I just want to clarify, I didn't make a comment regarding separation of church and I just wanted to make that correction for the record. But to talk about churches, and Denise, maybe this is something to look into, or how to manage the language in such a way. Many of the churches provide services that are agnostic to what your faith is, and St. Mary's is an example of that. They have their parish pantry, and they exclude no one. And so there are programs within churches that are doing this community service and social service that we're looking to support. So I do think it's important that in some way we're communicating the eligibility of those types of things, because, you know, to read the potential point, like that's not it's not a cross of church. I don't see it as only serving one faith or excluding anyone. They're providing a service to our community, just happen to be under the umbrella of the church. So if you can look at maybe the structure of some of those missions within different churches that serve all, I think it's, again, what the intent of the nonprofit is, to serve our community. As it relates to the arts and culture, I think the way I think about it, and these have been things that the Fine Arts Board obviously have brought forward, the Arts and Culture Commission have brought it forward, and they brought it forward from a few angles. One, it is creating employment opportunity. And employment opportunity means someone's earning a form of a living wage, or getting wages so that they don't fall into a need of housing or something else. So it is providing employment opportunity. Two, a lot of these activities, as Councilmember Milliman mentioned, it is a component of our health and wellness that is so important for our community now, because of all the reasons that were stated. So that is another really big factor. And third is really the economic stimulus that they bring. One of the reasons Weekends on Main was so successful is because it gave people they recognized something was happening. It gave them a reason to go and experience something, and engage with our community in a safe way. And that's what some of these programs do as well. It gives our community a place to engage safely and thereby drive traffic to our stores, drive traffic to our restaurants, so that we are creating that economic stimulus and help that recovery for our businesses. So it's not just arts and culture in a vacuum of its entity, but it's all the three components and the value that they provide to the community as a whole. So obviously, I'm very supportive of it. And we've gotten great support from our boards and organizations and our businesses and property owners that have said, yes, help us to bring more people to our downtown or to our Aspen Grove. I think one of the the idea of the pop-up gallery is the worst thing that can happen to any business community is empty storefronts. So this is an opportunity to utilize those empty storefronts and make them vibrant. Thank you.
Good. All right, thank you. Anyone else, council? So, city manager, you're looking for some direction here.
Yeah, so here's my suggestion. I'm hearing very different opinions about how to act on the funding here for this third phase for businesses. I've heard three in pretty strong favor of some kind of a priority system or rating system for those who qualify for the business grants. So I'm not sure I heard a fourth, maybe there is. I'm going to suggest that I actually place this on the agenda here for formal action by the council, first for the business grants and then second for the nonprofits. We'll try to incorporate some of what we've heard tonight, but I'm afraid I don't have enough clear consensus listening to the conversation on all issues. I'm hoping that's okay with council.
I think that, go ahead, Carol.
I'll address it to Jerry. Jerry, could we go through the council to give clearer direction to Mark? I'm not sure that how I got counted on that. Mark was just saying that he thought he had three. I don't know if I was counted or not.
I did not count you as one who wanted.
Count me. Yeah.
Okay, that's four. Okay.
Okay, so Mark, you're looking to bring this back on August 4th?
Yeah, I think that's my intent here. I think that the staff's going to have to spend a little bit of time trying to figure out how to prioritize this. I think that I have some concerns about exactly what that looks like and whether or not it will be eligible and defensible. I would also be concerned about how fair it might be perceived. So I do need to work with the staff to try to figure out how we would prioritize that. I don't know of any city in certainly Arapahoe County who's taking that approach. So we're going to have to work with the county staff to make sure it's eligible. So I think I've got some questions about the practicality of executing this that I just need to work through. And I think in the end, I think my preference would be is to have council act on this formally.
I think that's a good plan. That's a good plan. So we'll bring that back. Will it be a resolution?
I think just a simple motion on these different aspects. We'll separate the business from the nonprofits. That'd be my suggestion.
All right, cool. I think that's a good plan. That's a good plan. Was there anything else? I think that's it for that discussion then. That was our last item. So if we can go, down to our
Jerry,
updates. Yes.
We talked about a lot of different issues. Can we get a summary of the things that might be on the resolution and make sure that, or come for formal vote to make sure that it's exhaustive and appropriate, that we have everything?
That would be my intent, is to try to capture this conversation, and we'll incorporate what I believe is probably a recommended approach. We'll identify those issues that perhaps we did not incorporate, and then we'll let council decide if they want to do amendments, they want to change that in some fashion. But I'm going to do my best to kind of flesh out what I believe is going to be eligible with the CARES Act in whatever I recommend.
Great. Okay. So if it came as a resolution, that it can be pulled for discussion, and we have, and that's where the amendments and things. Is that where you're going to put it under resolutions?
Well, I wasn't intending a resolution. We certainly could do it that way. I think a simple motion and just individual items. So we'll have a suggested motion, and it could certainly be amended.
In general business, you're talking?
Yeah, general business.
Okay. All right.
We could always have a study session, Mark.
I think we've probably exhausted that, in my opinion. I'm ready for action.
Yeah, I think let's bring it back under general business, and then we can have a good discussion about it. Make whatever changes if necessary. Does that take care of that for you, Ham?
It does for me, yes.
I just want to make sure that we're clear. I mean, this is what I heard, that we had some differences of opinions on the religious, which may not be eligible because of the CARES Act, the percentage that goes to the arts, striking fraternal organization, the other thing had to do with, what am I missing? Oh, the business grants and having some different criteria in terms of not using first come, first serve. So that's what I'm hearing. I don't know, Mark, is that what you're hearing? It's just, I just want to make sure that we've kind of summarized this and it's just not left hanging.
Yeah, no, I think that's generally what I heard. I heard
Okay,
some object to the fraternal. I didn't hear everybody, so that's an example.
And maybe that is, I mean, maybe that's something that we can do a quick straw poll on so you know which way to go on that one. I don't know.
Let's put together something, Mark, for us all to digest and talk about on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think, again, I want to be able to go through this with the county staff who has to administer the CARES Act. So I think that's going to influence what I recommend back to you on some of these topics.
That'll be good. That'll be good. All right, let's move off this one and we'll move down to the updates from City Manager.
Well, let's see. The only update I had was just to kind of remind council that we've got another discussion of the CARES Act, just as Tiffany alluded to here in her presentation, to cover kind of a balance of the funding and how the staff has been trying to evaluate the opportunities here. Also that evening, we are going to be talking about the potential upgrades that are going to be necessary to the Littleton Center itself as it relates to the COVID-19 issue, as well as the capacity issue that was previously funded by council through impact fees. So we're going to try to bring those together so that the council has a clear view of the big picture. So that's my update here for this evening.
Great, thank you. We'll move to City Attorney.
I want to talk a little bit more about Metro Districts. And
No, thanks.
Kidding.
No, thanks.
Nope, nothing from the City Attorney. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Council, so our next meeting will be Tuesday and it will be both a regular and a study session. So if there's nothing else, it is, what is it, 8:56? And we are, I'm sorry, go ahead. Councilmember Elrod.
Yeah, Mark, can you give us an update of how the feedback is coming in for the ULUC? I noticed, they've done some office hours, but it's a really difficult document to review. Just can you let us know how that's going? Because I know that's ending this week.
Sure.
Maybe plug for everyone to do that.
I'd be happy to do that. I don't have one this evening. I don't have the specifics, but I'd be more than happy to follow up tomorrow and share with council an update.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Thank you. Anything else, council? Nothing? It is now 8:57, Karina. Hey, thank you, everybody. Have a good night. We are adjourned.
Thank you.